So I'd like to introduce our panelists. First up is Rob Sabella, Senior VP Product Development of Foundry. Next is Chuck Davidson, who has a great sense of humor. Chuck, founder, member, head of product at Cardfree.
Hi, Chuck.
And then we have Ajay Kapoor, CEO of Mobile. Thank you.
I would say the number one company out there doing mobile payments today is it's not PayPal, it's not Google, it's not even Square, it's Amazon. Which company out there is getting more dollars through their system and solving a real point of pain for customers? It's Amazon. It's really hard to peck in information on a mobile phone. These guys have your account information, they know where to ship, they have your credit card information, they have a Prime, they have a Prime service. Because of the pain of mobile, because of the pain of pecking information onto a small phone, as it relates to the whole e-commerce world, Amazon has come in and they're basically coming in and taking, I'll buy stuff on Amazon, not really even going to compare prices because it's just, I know I can do it with a few clicks. The really disruptive stuff that people talk about, that's about entering stores and not having to pull out your wallet, which I've started to do already with Square. I walked up to a food truck like a month ago. I didn't have, I had created an account. I looked up that this place was nearby, and there wasn't anything I had to show them. I just walked near them, and they basically saw that I had to spend $20 or something like that. They saw my face on it, it was approved, and there was no infrastructure there to do that. That's a really big deal. There's NFC and there's all these conversations, but there's companies that are doing this without infrastructure. So I think that's where we're going to see some really disruptive stuff as it relates to physical payments.
I always think about it as utility. It always does with utility. Like knowing the customer, knowing your customer's use case, like watching them in their daily workflow, and like where can you serve utility, right? And that's kind of like when we started mobile. We spent a lot of time watching people in line and all this good stuff, and what did they have with them, and what did their purse, what did their briefcase, if they have keys. At the moment, at the time, thinking, gee, how do we make sure folks can use the Starbucks card for every single transaction? Because we wanted them to use the card because it was great, but also because it was financially preferential to use the store value card versus a credit card. So, given that, the whole utility piece, we used to have a stopwatch. When we were doing development with you guys at Foundry, it was like if we have two rules, like 2 touches to pay, and if Chuck Davidson can look at his Visa card faster, or we can do a transaction on the phone, game over. Because you never want the user to take longer, right, to do something that's quote-unquote innovative. So everything you said totally resonates, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of my perspective, and it all came down to knowing the user and having utility, or they're going to try it.
So it seems that mobile payments and e-commerce is a very big deal. Let's see how we started. 2002. That was one of the major milestones that the number of mobile phones exceeded the landline, which was a rather interesting thing with that. In 2012, Stereo Park for Apple was the fact that they had more iPads over the end than MacBooks. In fact, Apple dropped the price of the MacBook Pro after this $100 pop. Let's see. How did this thing start? It primarily started in Japan and Europe. They were doing that via SMS to enable the payments. And as this thing started to go further and further, we start to look at mobile web payments through a variety of organizations. PayPal being one, Amazon, of course, they're everywhere. Google, it's constantly growing to the point that everybody is wondering, are we really forecasting this thing correctly? And now the big promise of NFC. And everybody hearing about NFC going to change it, NFC going to change everything, NFC going to change everything. Oh, iPhone 5 will bring NFC. Now let's look what happens in this. It said 19% of the world's mobile users are already using that for location services. And the interesting thing is, developing nations are more using the mobile systems than anyone else.
You lock it down so much that no one uses it, or you don't use it so much that there's fraud. So that's where you have to figure out where's the balance, right? You have to, you want adoption, you want ease of use, you want an amazing user experience, but you also have to be, smart about it, not obsessive.
I agree. I mean, the card issuers, most people know that they're mandating this EMV standard because there's a minimal amount of information that actually stored on mags, right? Today under physical plastic, and it's not dependent on NFC. They're going to reissue basically smart cards was the old name. That can all be tokenized in software, and all that complexity can be hidden from the consumer. And so we can actually make that process more secure and less fraudulent through software. So I totally agree. I do not believe ISIS, which is the joint venture between AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, will lead the way. You've got to deliver value to the consumer. You've got to deliver value around the payment transaction, incremental to just doing the payment itself. Because without that, you're just not going to get enough consumers actually adopting it because value proposition isn't strong enough versus just swiping your plastic today. So I'm not going to name like specific names, but I think those will be the winners, the ones that provide the most value for the consumer and are able to get the most consumer adoption.
For the personalization privacy thing, that's interesting. I look at it this way. If you're using an app that is kind of using its power for good, not evil, so if it knows things about you and then decides it's going to offer you lemon loaf versus chocolate cake because it knows that you like Ethiopian coffee, which pairs with lemon loaf, versus Latin American coffee, which is what I did. But that's cool because then it's like, okay, guess what? I have some information about you. I'm going to use it to curate something that hopefully you will find valuable. That kind of stuff is cool. I think consumers will self-select whether or not they want to be a part of that and give up a little information to get a little bit into it. So I think that's the continuum there too. Is hey, I'm more than happy for you to know where I am if it means the cab will be perfect, or for you to know what I eat if it means the offer I get will be something I like.
There's the early adopters. There's even the innovators that come and the early adopters, and they're just willing to do something. And then at some point, enough of them use them and tell other people who are like the early majority, and there's the late majority. And the late majority are the kinds of folks today that will look at some of this stuff, make it scary, and say, I'm not going to participate. And actually, that's exactly what you should do. If you're uncomfortable using this stuff, and there's no good reason to use it.
In the next 12 to 18 months, you will see banks actively trying to compete in both mobile banking and mobile payments with consumers.
What's really amazing to me is just the city we live in San Francisco. We get to see things, literally when they're being launched.